I slipped into the garage at 10:18 at night, careful not to wake him. I wanted to surprise my husband, but the surprise was waiting for me. Through the laundry room door, I heard a woman laughing. And then his voice cut through the air. He told her I was the perfect scapegoat. In that second, 12 years of marriage evaporated. He was not just cheating. He was planning to send me to prison for his crimes. My name is Megan Hart, and at 37 years old, I thought I was standing on the solid ground of a perfect life. I was wrong. I was standing on a trap door. I pulled my suitcase into the garage, moving with the slow, deliberate silence of a woman trying to be romantic. It was 10:18 at night. The house was dark, save for the faint, warm glow spilling from under the kitchen door. I had not turned on the overhead garage lights because I wanted to surprise Derek. My business trip to Chicago had been canceled 24 hours early due to a venue issue, and I had caught the last flight back to Columbus. I imagined his face lighting up. I imagined a glass of wine and a quiet night. I left my heavy luggage by the bumper of the sedan and crept toward the door connecting the garage to the laundry room. I reached for the handle, but my hand froze in mid-air. A sound drifted through the wood. A laugh. It was not Derek. It was a woman. The laugh was light, airy, and terrifyingly comfortable. It was not the nervous giggle of a guest. It was the possessive sound of someone who knew where the wine glasses were kept. My heart hammered against my ribs, a sudden, violent rhythm that made my breath catch. I stood there, paralyzed behind the laundry door, listening. Then I heard Derek. He was not whispering. He was speaking with the distinct, clipped tone he used when closing a deal. Just pin it all on Megan. The profile is clean. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. I pressed my ear closer to the cold wood of the doorframe. This was not the hushed tone of infidelity. This was business. The buffer accounts are set up. Derek continued, his voice terrifyingly calm. I used her digital signature key. By the time the auditors look at the timestamps, the money trail will show she moved the funds while she was, conveniently, away on business. I felt the blood drain from my face. My hands began to shake, a tremor starting in my fingers and traveling up to my shoulders, but inside my head, the panic hit a wall of ice. I had spent 15 years in risk compliance. I knew exactly what he was describing. He was not just cheating on me, he was framing me. I fished my phone out of my pocket, my thumb hovering over the screen. I hit the record button. "What about the authorization logs?" the woman asked. "Taken care of," Derek replied. I already spoofed the email from her terminal to accounting. The attachment has a little present in it, a malware script to scramble the access logs. It looks exactly like sloppy cover-up work. Her work. "God, you are thorough," the woman said. I recognized the voice now. It was Talia Reeves, a junior associate from his firm. When the press story explodes tomorrow, I just need to cry at the right time, and you will be the poor, unsuspecting hero betrayed by his greedy wife. I risked a glance through the crack in the doorframe. I could see a sliver of the kitchen island. On the marble counter, right next to where Derek usually set his keys, sat a thick, white envelope. It was a rush delivery addressed to me. The flap was torn open just enough to reveal the bold black header on the document inside. Subpoena. The word hit me harder than a physical blow. They were not planning to leave me. They were planning to send me to prison. I had to get out. If I walked through that door, I would be walking into a script they had already written for me. I stepped back, lifting my heels to keep my boots silent on the concrete. I backed into the cool, dark air of the garage. I grabbed the handle of my suitcase, ready to retreat. As I turned to leave, a glint of red light caught my eye in the upper corner of the ceiling, hidden amongst the rafters. I stopped. It was a camera, a brand new, high-definition security camera, pointed directly at the door I almost walked through. It was not there for safety. It was positioned to capture my reaction when I walked in to find the subpoena. It was waiting to record the breakdown of a guilty woman. I lowered my head and slipped out into the night, leaving the silence of my dead marriage behind me. I drove until my hands stopped shaking, which took nearly 20 minutes. The silence in the car was heavy, but the noise in my head was deafening. It was a chaotic reel of memories, playing backward from that garage door all the way to the beginning. I met Derek at a fundraiser in Columbus 12 years ago. He was not the loudest man in the room, but he was the most attentive. He had this way of tilting his head when I spoke, as if my words were the only thing keeping the earth spinning. He made me feel respected. He made me feel seen. That was his greatest trick. He did not sell me a dream of wealth or status. He sold me a reflection of myself that I wanted to believe in. I remembered the first time he offered to take over our finances. It was a Tuesday evening, and I was buried under compliance reports for Greystone payments. He massaged my shoulders, his voice low and soothing. "You are too smart for your own good." "Megan," he had said, kissing the top of my head, "people will use that against you because you think everyone has your heart. Let me handle the bills. Let me protect you from the boring stuff so you can shine." It sounded like partnership. It sounded like love. In reality, it was a leash being gently placed around my neck. The irony burned in my throat like bile. I was a risk compliance manager at Greystone Payments. My entire career was built on spotting anomalies, flagging suspicious transactions, and detecting fraud. I could look at a spreadsheet and see a lie hidden in the decimal points. But when it came to Derek, I had turned off my radar. I had willfully ignored the red flags because I wanted the fairy tale more than I wanted the truth. He had systematically isolated me. I thought about my college friends, the ones who used to call every weekend. Slowly, over the years, they had faded away. "She is just jealous of us." "Megan," Derek would whisper after a dinner party where a friend had made a snide comment about him. "They don't understand the kind of bond we have." Or worse, he would charm the ones who were closest to me, pulling them into his orbit until they were his friends. Not mine. He built a perimeter, and I thanked him for the walls. Then there were the little things, the convenient accidents. "Oh, I must have put your passport in my safe when we cleaned up." "Don't worry, it is safe there. I have your authentication token for the bank." I needed to check a deposit for us. He always framed it as a favor. He was saving me the trouble. He was being a good husband. But sitting in my car, staring at the empty road, I realized he was not saving me trouble. He was taking custody of my identity. My business trips were his favorite weapon. While I was in Chicago or Seattle, thinking I was building our future, he was back home using my absence to construct a false narrative. He used those dates to plant evidence, knowing I would have no alibi for my digital footprint because I was physically gone. My mother, Elaine, had seen it. She died of a stroke 5 years ago, but her voice suddenly rang clear in the dark cabin of my car. She never trusted Derek's smile. "Connie," she would say, using her pet name for me, "you catch thieves for a living. You look for the cracks in the system. Don't leave your skills at the door just because you are in love." Love is not a reason to be blind. I had dismissed her as bitter. I thought she was hard because life had been hard on her. But she was right. I had left my skills at the door. I had let Derek convince me that checking up on him was an act of betrayal. He had weaponized my own morality against me. A sob caught in my chest, but I swallowed it down. I could not afford to cry. Crying was for the Megan who lived in that house, the Megan who believed in partnership. That woman was dead. Derek had not just betrayed me. He had audited me. He had studied my habits, my insecurities, and my schedule like a complex system he intended to exploit. He did not want a wife. He wanted a proxy. He wanted a clean skin to wear while he committed his crimes, and he had spent 12 years grooming me to be exactly that. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white. He thought I was the perfect scapegoat because I was trusting. He forgot that I was also the person who cleaned up messes for a living. and he had just made a very messy mistake. I pulled into the parking lot of the airport hotel. Ignoring the trembling in my hands, I chose a generic chain hotel, one that Derek and I never used, and paid for a single room with cash I had withdrawn from an ATM inside the terminal. When the receptionist asked for a name, I did not hesitate. Megan Vance, I said. It was my maiden name. I had not spoken it aloud in 12 years, but tonight, it felt like the only clean thing I had left. Once inside the room, I did not turn on the television or unpack. I sat at the small desk and opened my work laptop. I did not connect to the hotel Wi-Fi immediately. Instead, I pulled up the offline security cache. My heart was pounding against my ribs, but my fingers moved with the muscle memory of a decade in risk management. I navigated to the recent login activity log. There it was, a successful login to the Greystone Payments mainframe. The timestamp was yesterday at 2 p.m. At that exact moment, I had been in a meeting in Chicago. The IP address was residential. It was our house. I reached for my phone. My first instinct was to send an email to the security team, but I stopped. Derek had said he spoofed an email from me. If I sent anything now, he might be monitoring the traffic. Or worse, he might have set up a rule to divert my outgoing messages. I could not trust the network. I dialed the direct line for Marcus, the head of internal security. He picked up on the third ring, his voice thick with sleep. Megan, Marcus asked. It is almost 11. Is everything okay? Marcus, listen to me, I said, keeping my voice low and steady. Do not create a support ticket. Do not log this call in the general system. I need you to do something for me, and I need you to do it right now. You are scaring me, Megan, he said. I need a full dump of my access logs for the last 48 hours, I commanded, and I need you to place a legal hold on my entire user profile. Nothing gets deleted, nothing gets overwritten. If anyone, and I mean anyone, tries to purge data from my account, I want a mirror copy saved to the isolate server. Is this a breach? It is worse, I said. Just do it, Marcus, please. My life depends on it. I hung up before he could ask more questions. I needed to know how Derek got in. I had two-factor authentication on everything. He could have my password, but he would still need my physical token. I looked at my phone settings, scrolling through the Bluetooth history. My eyes snagged on a device name I had ignored for months. Heart Office Key. I reached into my purse and pulled out my keys. There, dangling next to the car fob, was the leather keychain Derek had given me for my 36th birthday. He had told me it was a smart tracker, something to help me find my keys if I lost them. I popped the small leather casing open with my thumbnail. Inside, there was no tracker chip. It was a slim, high-end FIDO security key. He had not given me a gift. He had paired a hardware authenticator to my phone and laptop, disguised it as a thoughtful present, and carried the clone himself. He had been walking around with the keys to my professional life in his pocket for a year. I felt sick, but I forced the nausea down. I needed to keep him calm. If he thought I was on to him, he would accelerate the timeline. I opened my messaging app and typed a lie. Flight delayed due to weather. I am staying at the airport hotel tonight. Don't wait up. Love you. Typing love you felt like swallowing glass. I hit send, almost immediately. A notification popped up on my phone. It was an email to my personal account, marked with a high-priority red flag. Subject urgent witness subpoena, Greystone Payments litigation. My stomach dropped. I opened it. The document looked official, stamped with court seals and legal jargon. It demanded my immediate testimony regarding financial irregularities. But then I looked closer at the sender's address, Legal Admitted Greystone's Legal.com. Greystone Payments owned the domain, https google.com URL say aen source gmail q Greystone Payments com. We never used a hyphenated domain for legal matters. This was a phishing attack. It was a fake legal trail designed to panic me. Derek wanted me to reply. to click the link, to acknowledge the crime so he could have a record of my reaction. "You are trying to hurt me," I whispered to the empty room. "You want me to run so you can shoot me in the back." I closed the laptop. I was not going to run. I was going to hunt. I barely slept, my eyes glued to the ceiling as the hours crawled by. When the sun finally broke over the horizon, I was already dressed. A memory had surfaced in the middle of the night, clear and sharp. It was from 2 days before my mother passed. She had pressed a small, sealed envelope into my hand and whispered a command that made no sense at the time. "If you ever feel like your life is being bent into a shape you do not recognize," she had rasped, "go to Summit Ridge Trust in Dayton. Do not call, just go." I drove 40 minutes to Dayton, putting physical distance between myself and the house that was no longer a home. Summit Ridge Trust was an old building, heavy with marble and silence. I walked to the reception desk and placed my mother's old trust card on the counter. "I need to see Calvin Rourke," I said. The receptionist hesitated, but then she looked at the card. There was a small, embossed symbol in the corner, a golden sparrow that I had always assumed was just a logo. Her eyes widened slightly. She picked up the phone immediately. 2 minutes later, a man in a charcoal suit walked out. Calvin Rourke was older than I expected, with silver hair and eyes that seemed to measure the weight of my soul rather than my bank account. He did not smile. He looked at the card, then at me, and nodded once. "Come with me, Mrs. Hart," he said. He led me into a private office at the back and deliberately closed the heavy oak door. He moved to the window and twisted the wand to shut the blinds, plunging the room into a twilight gloom before turning on his desk lamp. "Your mother prepared for this day a long time before you did," Rourke said softly. He unlocked a drawer and pulled out a thick, red file. He slid it across the mahogany desk. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside, there was a stack of financial documents and a letter in handwriting I would recognize anywhere. It was my mother's script. "Read the letter first," Rourke instructed. I unfolded the paper. "Connie, if you are reading this, then my gut instinct was right. Derek is not who he says he is. I hired a private investigator 5 years ago. Derek was forced out of his previous firm in Cleveland. He was not laid off. He was caught padding expense accounts. He avoided prosecution by planting evidence on a junior analyst who had already quit. He destroys people to save himself. It is his pattern. I felt the air leave my lungs. He did this before he did," Rourke confirmed. "And he is doing it again. Look at the second document." I flipped the page. It was a corporate registration for a company called Harbor Hollow Consulting. I scanned the ledger. This company had been receiving monthly wire transfers labeled as consulting fees from vendors associated with Greystone Payments. "He created a shell company," I whispered. "The pieces clicking together. He has been taking kickbacks from my vendors and funneling the money into this account. Look at the signature on the incorporation papers," Rourke said, pointing a manicured finger at the bottom of the page. I looked. It was my signature, but it was not just a forgery. It was perfect. Too perfect. "It looks exactly like mine," I said. "It is a digital clone," Rourke explained. "Your mother's investigator found that Derek installed a keystroke logger on the family tablet you use for household documents. He didn't just copy the image of your name. He copied the pressure, the speed, the grain of your stroke. He stole the biometric data of your hand. I felt a wave of nausea. Every time I had signed a permission slip or a grocery delivery form on that tablet, I had been handing him the weapon to frame me." Rourke leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a heavy, brass key. He placed it on top of the file. "Elaine gave me very specific instructions regarding this key," Rourke said. "She told me I was never to give it to you unless you came to me under one specific condition." "What condition?" I asked. "She said." Rourke paused, his eyes full of pity. "She said to give you this key only if you came back from a trip early without telling your husband and found your life falling apart." I stared at the key. My mother had known. She had not just suspected Derek, she had understood his psychology so well that she predicted exactly how he would try to discard me. She knew he would wait for a business trip to make his move. "What is it?" I asked, my voice shaking. "It is a safety deposit box," Rourke said, "and inside is the only thing that can stop him." I turned the heavy brass key in the lock, and the safety deposit box slid open with a metallic hiss. I expected stacks of cash or perhaps my mother's missing diamond earrings. Instead, I found the cold, hard tools of espionage. Inside the metal drawer lay a black USB drive, a cracked burner phone, and a leather-bound notebook. I picked up the phone first. It was dead, but there was a charging cable coiled underneath it. I plugged it into the outlet in the private viewing room. As soon as the screen flickered to life, I navigated to the messages. There was only one thread, a conversation with a contact listed simply as R. Push for federal charges. One message read, "If the feds pick it up, her assets freeze immediately. She won't be able to hire decent counsel." "I don't want her talking," Derek had replied. "She won't talk if she is terrified." R came back. "We make this look like grand larceny. I will leak the investigation to the business journals on Monday." My stomach turned over. I knew who R was. The phrasing, the aggressive PR strategy, the manipulation of the press. It was Randall Keene. Derek had introduced him to me years ago as an old college buddy, a charming crisis management expert who always bought the most expensive wine at dinner. Randall was not a friend. He was a co-conspirator. I plugged the USB drive into the laptop Rourke had left for me. A video file popped up. It was grainy, likely recorded from a dash cam or a hidden device. It showed Derek and Randall standing in a parking garage. "We need a clean break," Derek said in the video, his voice echoing off the concrete walls. "I am done with her, but I am not splitting my equity. If she is fighting a felony embezzlement charge, she will sign anything I put in front of her just to stay out of jail. I am giving her a criminal record as a parting gift." I slammed the laptop shut. I felt like I was going to be sick. He was not just trying to cover his tracks. He was actively engineering my destruction to save his bank account. I reached for the notebook last. It was filled with my mother's handwriting at the beginning, but the last few pages were different. They were transcripts of encrypted notes she had found. I flipped to a page dated June 12th, 12 years ago. It was my wedding day. Next to the date, written in Derek's handwriting copied from some source my mother had intercepted, was a single line that froze the blood in my veins. "Megan equals asset/liability to be locked. Acquisition complete." I stared at the paper. I was not a wife to him. I was an asset to be acquired and a liability to be managed. Our entire marriage was a reverse risk management project. He had identified me as a target, secured me, and now he was liquidating me. I shoved everything into my bag and stood up. I had to move. I thanked Rourke with a curt nod and exited the bank. The bright morning sun felt exposing. I walked briskly to my car, got in, and locked the doors. As I pulled out of the bank's lot, I checked my rearview mirror. A black SUV pulled out immediately after me. I took a sharp right turn. The SUV followed. I circled the block and ran a yellow light. The SUV accelerated and ran the red to keep up. "Okay," I whispered, my grip tightening on the wheel. "You want to play?" I was not imagining it. I was being hunted. I drove toward the city center, heading for a multi-level parking structure attached to a shopping mall. It was Saturday, and the place would be packed. I whipped my car into the garage, spiraling up 3 levels before jamming my sedan into a tight space between 2 minivans. I didn't get out immediately. I opened a car-sharing app on my phone and located a rental vehicle parked 2 aisles over. I booked it instantly. I grabbed my bag and stayed low, weaving through the parked cars. I saw the black SUV prowling slowly down the ramp, its tinted windows scanning the rows. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I reached the rental, a nondescript gray compact, and unlocked it with my phone. I slid inside, started the engine, and waited. The SUV drove past my empty sedan, pausing for a moment before moving on to the next level. I reversed out and drove toward the exit, merging with the flow of shoppers leaving the mall. My breath came in short, sharp gasps. I was safe, but only for the moment. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the business card my mother had left in the file. Sloan Mercer, and Vale Legal Group. I dialed the number. It rang twice before a woman answered, her voice sharp and professional. Sloan Mercer. My name is Megan Hart, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. Elaine Hart was my mother. There was a pause on the other end, followed by the sound of a chair shifting. I have been waiting for this call. Megan. I have the files, I said, merging onto the highway. And I have a tail. They are using me as a scapegoat. Sloan Mercer did not offer me tea. She did not offer me a tissue. She sat behind a desk made of sharp angles and glass, looking at me with an intensity that made me sit up straighter. The office was silent, save for the scratching of her pen on a yellow legal pad. She stopped writing and looked me in the eye. We are at a crossroads. Megan, Sloan said, her voice devoid of the pity I had seen in everyone else's eyes. The man you married has spent a year building a cage for you. We have very little time before he locks the door. So I need an answer, and I need it now. Do you want to survive this, or do you want to win? I thought about the camera in my garage. I thought about the fake laugh in my kitchen. I thought of my mother's letter. I want to win. I said. Good, Sloan replied, clicking her pen. Then we play by my rules. Rule number 1 is silence. You do not confront him. You do not send him paragraphs of angry text messages. Nothing you write can be capable of being cut, pasted, and taken out of context to make you look unstable. If you must communicate, it is 3 words or less. We mapped out the next 72 hours with military precision. We were not just going to defend, we were going to lay a minefield. Step 1 was locking down the assets he had not touched yet. Step 2 was preservation. I worked directly with Marcus from internal security, patching him in on a secure line. We created a honeypot, a duplicate dummy user profile on the Greystone network. We are going to make it look like your account is still active and vulnerable. I told Marcus, let him think his malware is working. If he tries to execute another command, I want it to go to a sandbox server where we can record his keystrokes. I'm routing the traffic now. Marcus said, if he logs in, we will catch him in the act. Later that afternoon, I met with David, the CFO of Greystone Payments. We met in a rented conference room at a co-working space downtown, far away from the prying eyes of the office. I laid out the access logs, the IP addresses, and the Bluetooth key data. David remained silent for a long time. Then, he turned his laptop around to face me. Megan, there is something you need to see, David said, his face grim. We flagged a suspicious transfer request this morning. It was initiated with your digital signature, but per compliance, any transfer over $50,000 requires a secondary approval from an external partner. Who approved it, I asked, though a cold dread was already settling in my stomach. David, who approved it? Derek Hart, David said. He is listed in our system as a designated partner consultant for risk assessment. I stared at the screen. I never hired him as a consultant. I never authorized that role. The paperwork was filed 6 months ago, David said quietly. It has your countersign. He had not just stolen my password. He had infiltrated my professional hierarchy. He had forged documents to make himself my superior in the approval chain, ensuring that when he stole the money, it would look like we had colluded, or worse, that I had acted alone and he had merely negligently signed off. I called Sloan immediately. He is inside the corporate structure, I said, my voice shaking with rage. Not for long, Sloan replied. I am filing for a temporary restraining order based on the stalking and the illegal surveillance in your home, and I just sent a preservation notice to Randall Keene. If that PR hack deletes a single email, he goes to prison for destruction of evidence. We are tightening the noose. Megan. I spent the night in the rental car, moving between parking lots to avoid staying in one place. I found a bathroom in a 24-hour gym to wash my face. I looked at myself in the mirror. I looked tired. I looked scared. But under the fear, there was something else. It was the face of a woman who was done being a victim. I leaned in close to the glass, looking into my own eyes. I needed to be ready for the moment I saw him again. I needed to be bulletproof. You do not control this story anymore, I whispered to my reflection. It sounded weak. I took a breath and said it again, louder, letting the anger sharpen the words into a weapon. You do not control this story anymore. I returned to the house at noon, flanked by 2 uniformed officers. I needed to retrieve my personal effects. But that was just the cover story. I was walking back into the lion's den to see if I could get the lion to roar while the microphone was on. Derek met us at the door. He looked devastated. His eyes were rimmed with red, his shirt was rumpled, and he had the posture of a man carrying the weight of the world. It was a terrifyingly perfect performance. "Megan," he breathed, reaching out as if to hug me, then pulling back when the officer stepped forward. He looked at the police, his voice trembling with practiced concern. "Officer, please be gentle with her. She is unstable. The pressure at work has been overwhelming. She imagines things that aren't there." I felt the officer's gaze shift to me, searching for signs of hysteria. Derek was building the narrative right in front of my eyes. He was painting me as the mental patient, and himself as the long-suffering husband. I let my shoulders slump. I buried my face in my hands and let out a ragged sob. "I just want to talk to him," I cried, my voice muffled. "Please, just give me 2 minutes alone with my husband on the porch. I need to hear him say it is over." The officer hesitated, then nodded. "Keep it in sight, ma'am." We stepped out onto the screened-in back porch. I knew exactly where to stand. I positioned myself with my back to the yard, forcing Derek to face the house and the tiny, hidden camera lens in the corner of the ceiling. As soon as the sliding glass door clicked shut, the mask fell. Derek's face smoothed out. The grief vanished, replaced by a cold, sneering arrogance. "You are making a scene," he hissed, stepping into my personal space. "It is pathetic." "Why are you doing this?" I asked, keeping my voice loud enough for the microphone but low enough to keep the police from interfering. "Because I can," he said, checking his watch. "No one believes you. Megan, you are the only one with the access codes. You are the only one with the motive. By the time the audit is done, you will self-destruct. I am just watching the fire." I took a deep breath. This was the moment. "Okay," I said, wiping a fake tear. "You win. What do I need to sign to settle this quietly?" I expected him to negotiate. Instead, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded document. It was a divorce settlement, already drafted, already dated. "Full asset forfeiture in exchange for my silence regarding your addiction and theft," he said, thrusting the paper at me. "Sign it, and I won't press charges. I will let you walk away with your freedom." I took the paper, my hands shaking not from fear, but from adrenaline. I didn't sign it. I held it up, angling it so the hidden camera could catch the header, and then I pulled out my phone and snapped a high-resolution photo of the page. Derek stepped forward, confused. "What are you doing?" "I am considering my options," I said, backing toward the door. "You have no options," he snapped, his voice rising. "Randall is already handling the press. The story runs tomorrow. You sign this now, or you become national news." He had said the name. He had tied himself to the conspiracy. Suddenly, the kitchen door opened. Talia Reeves stepped out. She was dressed in one of my silk robes, holding a coffee mug like she owned the place. She looked at me with a smirk, but then her eyes flicked to Derek. The smirk faltered. I saw her hand trembling slightly as she gripped the mug. She was not looking at him with love. She was looking at him with terror. She knew what he was capable of, and she was terrified she would be next. Derek, the officers are asking for the time, Talia said, her voice thin. I am coming. Derek growled. He turned to go back inside. As he passed the entryway table, I seized my chance. I reached into my pocket and palmed the leather keychain, the one with the digital key he had used to frame me. With a sleight of hand I didn't know I possessed. I dropped it onto the tray where he kept his wallet. It landed with a soft clatter, right back in his possession. The digital forensics team would find it there when they executed the search warrant. I walked out past them, head high. As I passed the kitchen trash can, I saw a crumpled piece of paper resting on top. I glanced down. It was a printout of an email drafted to the board of directors. The subject line read, "My resignation and confession." It was the suicide note for my career. He was planning to send it from my account within 24 hours. I walked to the police car, my heart pounding a rhythm of war. He thought he had just won the negotiation. He had no idea he had just handed me the weapon to end him. The phone call from Marcus came at 2 in the afternoon, shattering the fragile calm I had managed to build in Sloane's office. He had finished tracing the root of the security breach. I expected him to say it was a sophisticated hack or another piece of malware Derek had planted. I was not prepared for the truth. The unauthorized privileges on your account were not a hack, Megan, Marcus said, his voice heavy with reluctance. They were granted manually by a super-user within Greystone. Someone used their own credentials to open the back door for Derek. Who? I asked, gripping the edge of the desk. It was Brooke Lansing. The room seemed to spin. Brooke was not just a colleague. She was the woman who had sat on my living room floor drinking cheap wine with me when my mother died. She was the one I had held while she sobbed over her divorce papers just 6 months ago. I had co-signed a lease for her when her credit was shot. Get her here, I told Sloane, my voice sounding like it belonged to a stranger. When Brooke arrived at the law firm an hour later, she looked small. She was wearing a coat I had given her for Christmas. She did not look at me. She sat in the leather chair across from me and crumbled. I didn't know. Megan, Brooke sobbed, her hands twisting a tissue into shreds. I swear to God, I didn't know he was going to frame you. He told me he just needed to check your work logs to make sure you hadn't made a mistake on the quarterly report. He said he wanted to fix it for you before the auditors came. He said he was protecting you. And what did he give you? Brooke, I asked, my voice deadly quiet. Because Derek never does favors for free. Brooke flinched. He paid off my student loans. $32,000. He said it was a loan between friends. You sold my life for $32,000. I stated flatly. I thought it was just one click. She pleaded. I just authorized the remote token. I didn't know about the money transfers or the shell companies. Please. Megan, if this gets out, I lose my license. I lose custody of my kids. Don't report me. I looked at her, and for a second, I wavered. I saw the terrified single mother who had made a horrible mistake. If I named her in the investigation, she would be destroyed. But if I protected her, the trail of evidence would break. Derek would claim the breach was my negligence. And without Brooke's testimony, I couldn't prove he had orchestrated it. Sloane leaned forward, her eyes cold. Derek lives on the compassion of others, Sloane said, cutting through the emotional fog. He counts on you being too nice to pull the trigger. But listen to me clearly. You cannot save a drowning woman if you are anchored to the bottom of the ocean. If you don't bury her. He buries you. Brooke stopped crying. She reached into her purse with a trembling hand and pulled out her phone. I have something, she whispered. I wasn't going to show you, but I recorded our call yesterday. When I asked him why the police were at your house, she pressed play. Derek's voice filled the room, arrogant and dismissive. Stop panicking, you idiot. Megan is finished. Once the press release hits, she is toxic. And don't worry about your involvement. Just keep your mouth shut, and once the dust settles, we will find a reason to fire you too. I can't have loose ends walking around the office. The recording ended. The silence in the room was absolute. I felt the last shred of my old self, the soft, forgiving part, wither and die. He had not just used me. He had used Brooke's desperation, bought her loyalty, and was already planning to discard her like trash. We were all just assets to be liquidated. I looked at Brooke. I did not feel pity anymore. I felt clarity. "I will work with the authorities to minimize your sentence," I said, my voice hard. "But you are going to sign a full affidavit. You are going to hand over every text, every email, and that recording. You are going to tell them exactly how he bought you." Brooke nodded, tears streaming silently down her face. "Okay." Sloane's phone buzzed on the desk. She glanced at the screen, and her expression darkened. "We have a problem," Sloane said. "My source at the network just texted. Derek isn't waiting. He has scheduled a press conference for Monday morning at 9 o'clock. He is going to announce the internal discovery of your embezzlement." It was Friday afternoon. I had 48 hours, one weekend, to rewrite the ending of a story he had been writing for a year. "Let him schedule it," I said, standing up. "He wants an audience. Fine. We will give him a show." I did not sleep. The concept of rest felt like a luxury from a former life. Sloane and I turned her conference room into a war room, covering the glass walls with a minute-by-minute reconstruction of the last week. We cross-referenced my flight logs, the GPS data from my rental car in Chicago, the VPN connection times, and the hotel keycard access logs. We were building an alibi out of digital scraps, trying to prove that I physically could not have executed the transfers. At 3 in the morning, Sloane stopped pacing. She tapped a marker against the glass, circling a small, empty space on the timeline. "Here," Sloane said, her voice tight with exhaustion. "Tuesday, between 9:14 and 9:25 at night. There is an 11-minute gap. Your phone was disconnected from the hotel Wi-Fi, and your GPS went dark." I stared at the time. I remember that. My room key demagnetized. I went down to the lobby to get a new one. I left my phone on the charger in the room. "That is exactly when the unauthorized admin protocol was activated on your laptop," Sloane said. "If you were in the lobby, you are clear. We need the hotel security footage." I called the hotel immediately, putting it on speaker. The night manager sounded bored until I mentioned a subpoena. Then he sounded apologetic. "I am sorry, ma'am," the manager said. "Our system overwrites data every 7 days to save server space. That Tuesday footage was purged yesterday morning." I felt the blood drain from my face. It was the perfect blind spot. Derek knew the retention policies. He had timed it perfectly. Then my cell phone rang. It was Calvin Rourke. "Ms. Hart," Rourke said, his voice crisp. "I received an alert from the Sentinel Preservation Service. It is a third-party data archive your mother subscribed to years ago. It automatically pays a premium to major hotel chains to mirror security footage whenever a family member checks in. It is part of her trust requirements." I could barely breathe. "Do you have the footage from Chicago? I just sent the link to your attorney." Sloane was already clicking the file. The video loaded on the large screen. It showed the hallway outside my hotel room in Chicago. The timestamp read 9:15 at night. A figure walked into the frame. He was wearing a baseball cap pulled low and a generic hoodie, but I knew the walk. I knew the slight roll of the shoulders. He stopped at my door. He did not knock. He pulled a key card from his pocket, a duplicate, and slid it into the lock. The light turned green. He entered my room while I was downstairs. He spent exactly 9 minutes inside enough time to unlock my laptop with the cloned key, execute the script, and plant the evidence before slipping back out. I sank into the chair, the room spinning. "He followed me," I whispered. "He didn't just hack me from home. He flew to Chicago, stalked me to the hotel, broke into my room, and then flew back to Columbus to pretend he missed me." It was a violation so profound it made me nauseous. He had been a ghost in the hallway while I slept. Sloane was already typing furiously. "I am filing an emergency injunction. This proves physical tampering and stalking. I am asking the judge to block his press conference on the grounds that it is part of an active criminal conspiracy. And I am getting a warrant for his travel history. A notification pinged on my laptop. It was a new email, sent from an anonymous server. Subject A, little advice. I opened it. There was no text, just a blurred photo of me having dinner with a male client in Chicago, strictly business, but the angle made it look intimate. Below it was a line from Randall Keene. If you show your face on Monday, the world sees this. The headline will be Embezzling Wife Caught Cheating. Walk away. Megan, they were pivoting. They knew the financial frame-up might have holes, so they were switching to moral assassination. They wanted to shame me into silence. A dry, jagged sound escaped my throat. It was a laugh, though it held no humor. What is it? Sloane asked, pausing her typing. They are trying to blackmail me with a fake affair, I said, staring at the screen. They think I am worried about my reputation. I stood up, the exhaustion replaced by a cold, sharp energy. My mother had prepared me for this war, and Derek had just given me the ammunition to end it. Let them try, I said. They are bringing a rumor to a gunfight. Monday morning arrived with a cold, gray drizzle, but my vision had never been clearer. Derek had set up his press conference in the lobby of a high-end office building, intending to announce the tragic discovery of my financial crimes to a room full of business reporters. He wanted to control the narrative. Instead, he walked into a wall. I did not enter through the side door this time. I walked through the main entrance, flanked by Sloane and a team of federal investigators. Derek was adjusting his microphone when he saw the badges. He froze. A court-marshal stepped forward and handed him the injunction, effectively silencing him before he could speak a single lie. I did not make a speech. I simply walked up to the lead investigator and handed him a silver USB drive. Everything is here, I said, my voice steady. The recording of him admitting to the frame-up, the video of him conspiring with Randall Keene in the parking garage, and the access logs proving he used a cloned key. Derek tried to pivot, his face flushing with panic. He pointed a shaking finger at me. She is unstable, he shouted to the confused onlookers. She is having a psychotic break. This is all a delusion she concocted because of the stress. Sloane stepped forward, holding up a tablet displaying a still image. It was the photo of the hidden camera Derek had installed in our garage. Is the camera you installed to watch your wife cry a delusion? Mr. Hart, Sloane asked, her voice cutting through the room like a knife. We found the receiver in your private office. You were not worried about her mental health. You were gathering blackmail material. Derek opened his mouth to argue, but the air was sucked out of the room by a commotion near the exit. Randall Keene, who had been lurking in the back to manage the press, was being handcuffed. Investigators had seized his phone and found the live draft of the smear campaign Derek had paid for. The script was laid out in black and white. Then came the final blow. Talia Reeves, who had been standing near the podium as a witness for Derek, suddenly stepped away from him. She walked straight to the investigators. He made me sign a non-disclosure agreement, Talia said, her voice trembling but audible. He told me if I didn't help him, he would edit the logs to make it look like I was the one laundering the money. I want to testify. Derek looked at her with pure hatred, but he was cornered. The lead investigator looked at the report I had provided, specifically the section regarding the Chicago trip. Mr. Hart, the investigator said, we have video footage of you entering your wife's hotel room in Chicago at 9:15 at night. That is the exact time the unauthorized transfers were made from her laptop. You were in the room for 11 minutes. The silence that followed was heavy and absolute. Derek Hart, the man who had spent a year crafting the perfect lie, had forgotten one simple truth you cannot hide from a woman who assesses risk for a living. The officer spun Derek around. The click of the handcuffs was the loudest sound in the lobby. As they led him past me, he lunged against the restraint, his eyes wild. You ruined my life, He hissed at me. "You destroyed everything." I looked him in the eye. I felt nothing, no love, no hate, just a profound sense of release. "No," I replied calmly. "You did it to yourself." By noon, Greystone Payments had issued an internal memo clearing me of all suspicion and announcing a civil lawsuit against Derek and his shell company. I was no longer a suspect. I was the key witness. I stood outside the building, taking a deep breath of the damp city air. It felt clean. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the final envelope my mother had left in the safety deposit box. Inside, there was no money, no deed, just a single strip of paper with her handwriting. "You do not need to be believed. You need to be proven." I folded the note and put it back in my pocket. My phone began to buzz with calls, reporters, colleagues, old friends who suddenly wanted to reconnect. I looked at the screen for a moment, then held down the power button. The screen went black. I walked toward my car, alone. I did not need to explain myself to anyone. I had won the only thing that mattered. I had won back my name. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please drop a comment below, sharing your location and your thoughts on Megan's revenge. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to subscribe to the Mia Revenge Stories channel, hit the like button, and smash that hype button to help this story reach even more people.